I'm Mary Chapman. I'm the Academic Director of the Public Humanities Hub. And today I'm chairing a session on a showcase session of projects. 3 are from UBC, 2 are from elsewhere. This session will bring together these teams, each of which will discuss their DH projects for about 8 to 10 minutes. So I'm going to call each of the 5 teams up one by one so that they can introduce themselves, because there are a lot of people to keep track of and some people aren't presenting but are on the call. And I just want to remind everybody that this session is being recorded. Okay, the first team is Team Mahiet, Collaboration in the Paris Book Trade, 1325 to 1350. Take it away.
Thank you, Mary. Hello, everybody. My name is Erik Kwakkel. I'm the PI of this project. I'll give you sort of an 8-minute helicopter view over the project in the hope that you'll be tempted to have a closer look in the breakout room. So there's lots more detail on various aspects that I'm going to talk about in these few minutes in the breakout room. But this is sort of to give you a general breakdown of the project and the main components and the goals and the rationale, so that we don't have to do that in the breakout room. We'll have a sort of a very sophisticated thing set up that we do a cycle that sort of goes for 25 minutes, and the cycle starts again. And every time in this cycle, there's 3 moments where you as an audience can choose on a particular aspect you want to hear more. So in an ideal setting, we'll have 3 different cycles, but we'll see how this works. I've never done this before. So the project Trace and Describe is basically at its essence a way to look differently at 35 medieval manuscripts. So before printing was introduced in Europe, all writing was basically done with the pen, including book production. While it's a very old discipline, the study of these manuscripts, there are some things that sort of are advancing now that we are in a digital period. First, because there are more digital manuscripts available online, and also because there's more digital tools available to study these manuscripts. So we're seeing much of the field sort of great advances in various aspects of studying these books. This particular project is centered, it's a trial to see a proof of concept, if you want, to see if what we do can actually be done on a larger scale. So what we do, we look at 35 medieval books from one center, Paris, from sort of roughly the first half of the 13th century. And the idea is that in this particular center of book trade in medieval Paris, lots of clients were around and lots of scribes were around, lots of illuminators, bookbinders, booksellers. And the idea is, can we, based on these 35 manuscripts, make a network, a small one, a trial network, of all these participants that are available sort of through surviving manuscripts. So do surviving objects provide us the means to recreate a network of artisans in Paris in a certain period, a quarter century? You would think that this has already been done, but no, because all these people are anonymous. So I will show you in the breakout room a page of a manuscript, and you can see that there's various people working on this manuscript. In fact, often a team of 5 or 6, but you can't really tell who did what, and there's no names attached to it, so that you can't really make a very detailed database of participants in this particular project that resulted in one particular book. So what we did is we decided to look at one particular important decorator, Mahiet. So Mahiet, you want to say if you pronounce it as it's spelled. So Mahiet, he's an illuminator at the heart of this particular book trade moment in Paris, the second quarter of the 13th century. And we have a list of 35 firmly confirmed manuscripts in which he participated in making. And so we have a stable starting point, But then he worked in some manuscript with a different person, one or two, and another manuscript with another two different people. The scribes are different in many manuscripts, but in some they are the same. And so based on that starting point, looking at one individual, we have the means to start sort of chipping away at the network by just looking at the artistic side of things. So we're going with conclusions by art historians, and we're throwing our own conclusions in this mix, which is the scribal side. So the people who actually copied by hand with a pen these 35 books. Because these scribes are usually ignored in studies of this particular network of the books copied by Mahiet and his colleagues, because it's very hard to see for art historians if the written text is the same in one manuscript as in the other. So you can't really tell unless you're an expert, namely a paleographer, as myself. You can't really tell if two books are copied by the same person. So a network study is sort of stopped at the level of the scribe. So whereas the art historians are able to relate books to each other because they have the same artists and the same styles, the same colors, the same patterns, the same iconographical design, the level of the writing of the text, the copying, is never taken part, never sort of included in that study of the network of that a very important moment in Paris. So you can say the scribes are ignored, so let's trace them by looking at manuscripts. But since none of the manuscripts actually say I was copied by this scribe, we need to go deeper, and this is where the digital aspect comes in. We need to make what I call a fingerprint of the handwriting of an individual, in which we map certain letter forms and contrast it with others of the same letter forms, and try to deduce if one scribe follows certain patterns in his handwriting, so that you can then say, okay, given that these are the popular features of this particular individual in his handwriting, let's see if we can find the same features in other manuscripts, and thereby sort of drawing relationships between one scribe and multiple manuscripts, but also through that, you can relate individual scribes to the artisans that are also found in these same manuscripts. So you have a scribe A with an illuminator B, and a flourisher D, and a bookseller E in this particular book, and you go to the next manuscript, you get different relationships. All this we hope to throw in a database. So we're now filling our database, we're in that stage. And then we'll, with the visualization techniques, hope to show in a sort of a model how this particular network in this particular quarter century in the busiest commercial hub in Paris, all people work together, and not just the individuals that we always looked at, which are those who made images, but also the individuals who copied the text, and also those who sold the books, which are presently cannot be seen, they're invisible. And I'll talk more about that in the breakout room.
All right, so moving to group 2 about Johnson's dictionary project.
Okay, so my name is Beth Young. I'm at the University of Central Florida. In the breakout room, I'll give an overview of what we have to talk about. All my colleagues are here, and they're also looking forward to talking during the Q&A session. They are Abigail Moreshead, Carmen Mathis, Will Dorner, Amy Giroux, and Connie Harper. And as you can see from my slide, well, no, you can't see from my slide, we're all from UCF except for Carmen, who recently accepted a job at the University of Regina. So our project is to make an online dictionary edition of Samuel Johnson's Dictionary of the English Language. And we're planning to actually put 2 of the folio editions online, the 1755 first folio edition and the 1773 fourth folio edition, which is the last edition that Johnson himself worked on. And our goal is to make it have the same functionality as other modern scholarly dictionaries. And it started as a crowdsourced project online with another person, an independent scholar. And we are about a year in, and we've run into some interesting challenges that we've been working through collaboratively. And when I describe this project to other people, maybe you all have run into this also, sometimes I get this puzzled look and they say, well, what do you actually have to do? I mean, aren't you just putting the dictionary online? That means you have to get a computer to read the print, and that's it, right? You just interpret the print into a digital format. Well, as we all know, there's lots to do, and hardly any of this project has turned out the way that we expected, even before the pandemic came along. So we look forward to discussing different aspects of the project with you, and we've identified several areas that were particularly challenging and also interesting to talk about. The first one was getting the source materials. Johnson's dictionary is in the public domain. It's famous enough that it's been in print in some form ever since it was first published in 1755. And we also have technology for digitizing text, and that technology has been steadily improving. So you would think that getting the materials for the project would be fairly straightforward. But we actually run into problems or challenges in getting not only a usable transcription of the text, but also facsimile images of the text, and even using a portrait of the author, even though there are numerous portraits of the author all in the public domain. The next area is image creation and file management. We've been fortunate enough to get numerous student volunteers and also volunteers from off campus, and they've helped us quite a bit with creating images, editing XML, researching quotations. Their contributions have been extremely welcome, but then the more people involved in the project, the more file management challenges we have. So, for example, our goal is to have a separate image for every entry in both editions, and each edition has approximately 43,000 word entries in it, so that's a lot of images. So we've had to develop collaboration strategies for working with both the files and the volunteers, and Abigail Moreshead is looking forward to talking about that. The dictionary also includes more than 114,000 illustrative quotations to illustrate word usage. And this was an important practice that influenced later lexicographers, but it also created a lot of puzzles because it's not always apparent where the quotations come from. And on top of that, Johnson edited them significantly in order to get them to fit into the dictionary. Even though it's 2 folio volumes long, there were still space limitations. So Carmen Mathis is going to talk about the challenges that we've run into with quotations research. Then there are challenges of digital markup. We were actually given from the University of Toronto a TEI encoded transcription of the 1755 edition, but all TEI markup is not the same, so that made us run into some new complications in between different ways of coding, typographical errors, large file size. So our markup itself is a collaboration between us, the coders who came before us, the students who are working alongside us. Our colleague Will Dorner will talk about markup challenges, including how he managed to get the source document, which was one giant file, into individual TEI files using XSL transformation. As you can tell, this is a giant project, and so fortunately we've been able to do some of the work through automation. The large quantity of words and quotations make this a challenge to process. My colleague Amy Giroux is going to talk about some projects that she's been working on with undergraduate computer science teams to use computer vision and machine learning to create page images and to create independent word level image files. And also there's a new project she's working on to help us research the sources of quotations. Our final goal is to have a reliable, searchable online dictionary. And so the searching capabilities of the dictionary are going to be very important. The ability to search by either the transcription or the corrected encoded data. So we can search meaningfully when there are stop words, like if you want to search for something that has the word not in it. Also, ways to search if you don't know the exact word that you're looking for. So our user interface and database design need to be created uniquely for this project. And Connie Harper is working on that programming, and she can talk about how she's addressing the challenges that we've run into. So that's the general overview of our presentation. We look forward to discussing all of these things more in the breakout room, and we can actually also show you the site if you like in the breakout room.
Thank you so much, Beth. Our next group, Group 3, Canada's Early Women Writers, Playing Nicely with Others.
So I'm here to talk about the Canada Early Women Writers Project, Playing Nicely with Others. I'm going to run through a bunch of slides now, and we can go through them again in the room because they've had lots of active links. Unlike the other two projects we've heard about, this is a project that's been underway for quite a while, so we're not starting out. In fact, we're kind of wrapping up. So the whole purpose of this project has been to demystify the range of women writers in Canada. Canadians love to congratulate ourselves on our remarkable women writers, the big names, Atwood, Monroe, Gabrielle Waugh, Carole, Shields, but they are just the very, very slim selection of a very, very large terrain of writers, which I've been working on for many years. Many years ago, I began to document women writers who published in English in Canada before 1950. The first outcome of that was the Canada's Early Women Writers Database, CEWW, or Q for short, which is part of the QUIRT project housed at the University of Alberta. And that contains detailed information on nearly 800 writers. However, during the course of collecting all that information, on those writers, we collected scads of details on thousands of women about whom almost nothing could be found. Fortunately, in 2017, we were able to get a grant from SSHRC's Canada 150 Connections program, and that enabled us to set up the second database, the Database of Canada's Early Women Writers, or DOCEWW, D-O-C-E-W-W, which contains scraps, and sometimes they're really just scraps of information about close to 5,000 women in Canada who published something in English in or before 1950. So connection is really an apt word. We got a connections grant, and this connection is the theme of this project, and connection has been very much part of our experience. And I'm just going to run through a few quick examples of stories of connecting at various times with relatives, with other academics, and with other researchers. This is one of my favorite experiences. After connecting with researchers and custodians in archives, libraries, and universities, and cities and whatever, a reason finally came up for me to actually investigate the ROM, the Royal Ontario Museum, and lo and behold, discovered there, with the help of Brendan Edwards, who's the department head of the Library and Archives, we discovered stashed away in various corners of the ROM, it's a very siloed institution, papers of a number of women who were involved with the ROM, who published, and who are now in our database, and we've got links to those which we can investigate a little later when you meet us in our room. A wonderful example of research by a relative is the story of Sarah Jameson Craig. She has the good fortune to have a granddaughter who's an English professor, great-granddaughter, so who's an English professor, Joanne Findon. She's an English professor at Trent. She's actually a medievalist, but she did a wonderful job of researching her remarkable great-grandmother, who was quite an intriguing figure involved in all sorts of alternatives in the middle of the 19th century, dress reform, alternative medicine, utopian communities, and she did some writing. So Joanne's written a book, which is much more informative than our database, and but she was very helpful in helping us confirm details. We've also had the wonderful experience of dealing with a living writer, Beatrice Rowley, who published poetry under the name R.H. Grenville. Karen, my associate, discovered her through an online forum. Her daughter connected with us, and Beatrice was still alive when our project commenced. She lived to be 100, and she lived to see herself represented in our database. She was a remarkable person. Another family example, Emily Bevan lived in New Brunswick for a while, but her family descendants ended up in Australia, one of whom was a person who had a family album with this acrostic. She found us through the internet, and we worked with her to try and decode the acrostic that was in Emily Bevan's album. We're still missing a few words, and if anybody wants to try their hand, we'd be very happy for further collaboration. Then we run into people like this bizarre, slippery figure of Martha Craig. She's intrigued a number of people who have helped us try to put a story together, although there's all sorts of really weird loose ends. They range from a local historian in County Antrim in Northern Ireland, which is where Craig was born, to a former grad student who wrote our blog entry and almost got trapped in the rabbit hole of Martha Craig, but we managed to pull her out in order to finish her dissertation. Two of our authors happened to be nurses. One was a poet, Isa Grindley Jackson, and one was Jane Leahu, who wrote a mystery novel. With Jackson, we were helped by her great-grandson. With Leahu, we shared our findings with the researcher who twigged us on to Leahu in the first place. She discovered her through her research on World War I nurses. With Lynn Cook, we have another author who was alive when we started and was very helpful in helping us figure out the ins and outs of her career and sorting out her different publications and pseudonyms. So other people who contributed include Brian Busby, custodian of the Dusty Bookcase blog, which is fascinating if you're interested in weird old books. And several family members who not only contributed information, but actually assisted with the writing up of their entries. In many instances, of course, it's the descendants of writers who are most intrigued and most interested in helping share the information and investigating their grandmother's or great-grandmother's stories. So we've got this whole list of other stories of connection, which you're happy to click on and find out more about, either when we meet a little later or at your leisure. We've also created a slide of some of the resources we've looked at. These are just this is just a sampling of our printed resources. We've got many more listed in our extensive bibliography in the Docu project. This screen finally is to acknowledge the assistance we've received over the years from many important contributors. We've been supported by SSHRC, by the CFI, by funding from the English department at SFU, from the Dean of FAS, and from the DHIL, Digital Humanities Innovation Lab at SFU. Tomorrow there's going to be another presentation relating to work of the lab at 2:45 under the title Collaboration in the Middle, and you'll be able to hear more about what's going on up there in the top of the library. So this slideshow is up and available, and we look forward to sharing more of our stories and receiving feedback from everybody who's listening in right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Carole. The next group, place-based approaches to knowledge exchange, the Downtown East Side Research Access Portal.
Okay, thank you everybody so much. Thanks for joining us today to discuss our place-based approach to the development of a unique knowledge exchange resource, the Downtown East Side Research Access Portal. We'd like to start by giving a special thank you to the Digital Humanities Conference organizers for pivoting this opportunity online. I'm Heather Holroyd, the Community-Based Research Coordinator at the UBC Learning Exchange, and I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining you today from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, Squamish, and Stolo First Nations in what we today call East Vancouver. So co-presenting with me today is a subset of the 12-person steering committee for the Making Research Accessible initiative, which oversees the Downtown East Side Research Access Portal. To save time for our presentation content, we invite you to join us in our breakout room or take a look at the conference program for more information about each of our professional roles, as there are so many. So here's an overview of our presentation, which includes a quick context setting related to the Downtown East Side, the legacy of research in the neighborhood, and how we've responded to what we heard, followed by some of the challenges and opportunities we've experienced as a result of this work. So we completely relate to the comments that Beth provided earlier. So we look forward to some more discussion in our Jitsi room. So for those unfamiliar with the Downtown East Side, it is comprised of 7 adjoining neighborhoods that make up the historic heart of the city of Vancouver. Over time, government initiatives, including the deinstitutionalization of mental health services, global health crises such as HIV/AIDS, the ongoing impacts of colonization, and increasing gentrification have led to the rise in homelessness, drug use, crime, and poverty that are commonly reported in the media. What is less well recognized, however, is the tremendous amount of research with global impact informed by the lived experience and knowledge of Downtown East Side organizations and residents. In 2017, the UBC Learning Exchange analyzed active and approved UBC ethics applications and identified 74 ongoing studies with 272 participating researchers for projects situated in the neighborhood. This analysis is just one slice of ongoing research activities in the downtown east side. The downtown east side is over-researched due to repetitive studies on a narrow scope of issues and limited reciprocity in sharing research findings or directing research priorities. The manifesto referenced on this slide is a community-authored resource to provide researchers with some community members' expectations for research-related engagement. I highly recommend you check it out. It's a great read. So in 2014, the Learning Exchange consulted downtown east side organizations to learn about how we could support connections between research and the community. Staff described how the downtown east side has been the site of a significant amount of research, but that the results are often not accessible and aren't seen to make a tangible difference in the day-to-day lives of those in the neighborhood. The Making Research Accessible in the Downtown East Side Initiative, or MRAI, was founded in response. The Downtown East Side Research Access Portal, a project of the Making Research Accessible Initiative, co-led currently by the UBC Learning Exchange and Irving K. Barber Learning Center at the UBC Library, launched a new portal in early spring 2020. The latest version of this public online portal is intended to improve access to academic research as well as community-generated research and reports relevant to the Downtown East Side. The Downtown East Side Research Access Portal is consistently informed by consultation with community organizations and local residents and has a longer-term objective of reducing the number of repetitive studies and resulting research burden on the community. It is worth noting that the current collection contains over 900 items. The Downtown East Side Research Access Portal is unique in that it isn't focused on a specific topic, but that on curating an open access collection of materials related to a geographic place, the Downtown East Side. Developing a geographically focused portal has led to a number of interesting challenges and opportunities, some of which my colleague Anita will now discuss.
Hello, my name is Anita Fata. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the co-op student librarian at the Making Research Accessible Initiative. One of the challenges we face is to open access to materials about or relevant to the Downtown East Side. The MRII explores different ways of opening access. One of the first attempts was to collaborate with Circle, UBC's open access digital repository. Circle stores materials created by the UBC community. You may be familiar with institutional repositories storing dissertations and faculty publications, but this was a new way to work with Circle. One of the early issues was motivating scholars to self-archive. Scholars face barriers in doing this. Publications have different copyright restrictions, and it can be challenging to navigate copyright licenses and identify correct versions of their works to share. We work with scholars to support them in archiving their items. Early on, items were housed in Circle with special metadata, a geographic location tag, to identify items in the DTS collection. This increased our items from 40 to 300 in 2 years. We also worked with DTS community organizations to preserve 100 community materials, but it became clear that Circle was not enough to meet all of our goals. Circle is a good tool for preservation and storage, but has policies about the scope of materials that can be preserved and who is able to deposit those materials. We needed a platform that would allow for a greater range of materials and creators. This need led to the development of the current DTS wrap, which allows us to collaborate with partners to facilitate both long-term preservation and access to community-relevant work. This item is such an example. This July, Nick Ubels, the Learning Exchange Community Engagement Librarian, attended a DTS Literacy Roundtable meeting. There he heard a master's student speak about her work. Nina Bennett comes from a community development background, and in her informative presentation was well received by the community members who requested access to it. Nick then approached me about including the work in the wrap. Working together with Nina and Circle, we archived this graduating project, making it accessible to a larger audience. A second challenge is improving discovery. This refers to the ability to find materials relevant to the Downtown East Side. We want to improve people's ability to happen across information in this collection. We can improve discovery through using metadata, such as topic headings and subject headings, to represent relationships between creators, contributors, and materials, and by adding formats beyond scholarly articles, such as podcasts and research summaries. Here we have a podcast about Indigenous women in the DTS. This platform allows us to link materials, thereby showing connections between the episode and the Red Women Rising report by the Downtown East Side Women's Center. By reaching out to Scott and A, we also started to collaborate on archiving this item for long-term preservation. While we don't have time to delve into much detail here, we also work with instructors to develop assignments that enhance the collection. For example, students can create plain language infographics. By connecting infographics to scholarly articles, we can improve discovery of research findings. As you can see, the RAP is not just a static descriptive database, but an active, collaborative, place-based portal. We're working with community organizations and institutions to build a portal that works for community members, researchers, and students, which Heather will now discuss.
So one theme that has emerged strongly throughout this work is the principle that access does not equal accessibility. And we believe that context can improve accessibility. The DTS RAP provides context through high quality curation, and this involves different kinds of scholarly outputs selected for relevance to place, presenting these materials alongside community generated materials, providing appropriate metadata, including custom topics, and building out the online environment with directories of researchers, with relevant news and blog posts, and with other materials that contribute to knowledge about the extent, nature, and process of research in this community. And an important contextual element is the establishment and maintenance of relationships that allow for multivalent knowledge exchange. One of our team members described our way of operating as, we all understand that you don't just make a thing and then call it done and forget it. And consultation and building relationships is an integral part of this project. As the portal has developed, community members have shaped it via interviews, focus groups, and user experience testing. In order to continue to understand the needs of our many audiences, we persist in engaging different groups. For example, last summer, we held a metadata-thon with iSchool students and faculty, librarians, and library staff from a variety of public and academic institutions, kind of a crowdsourcing or hive mind way to locate additional items for the RAP and to add the metadata needed to describe them as part of the collection. This event also facilitated discussions around knowledge exchange and gave us a chance to start learning how to support various intermediaries in engaging their end users with this resource. Interinstitutional collaboration on the project steering committee has also led to the kindling of an informal network of information workers in the downtown East Side, including representatives from public libraries, arts organizations, and community and organizational archives who are interested in sharing knowledge, needs, and resources in a place-centered way. And finally, looking beyond the neighborhood, collaboration on this project paved the way for the UBC Library to join the Community Scholars Program, an SFU library-led initiative to support public use of scholarly information. The program involves nonprofit organizations in the downtown East Side and throughout the province. The relationships we've built give us opportunities to alternate our contextual focus between very local concerns and broader ecosystems of knowledge production and exchange. And in the spirit of continuing to seek a generative feedback loop and to grow our network, we invite you to contact the DTES RAP and to sign up for the newsletter. And we have links for that posted in the chat, I think, or soon to be posted. And we invite you all to join our Jitsi breakout room. We look forward to carrying on the conversations we've been having and invite you to share your experiences, knowledge, and questions with us. Thank you.
Super, thank you. And now to hear from our final group, Willis Monroe on collaborating across time and space, the database of religious history.
Thank you for the opportunity to present. These projects all seem really fascinating, and I wish I had brought more collaborators with me so I could cycle through the breakout rooms myself. But as it is, I'll be in mine and you can come talk to me. So my name is Willis Monroe. I'm a historian of science and religion, focusing primarily on Mesopotamia, but I'm a research associate in Asian studies and the current managing editor for the database of religious history. I'm going to give a brief overview. I know we're a little tight on time right now. I don't want to give too much away, so you'll come talk to me, but I want to also show you a little bit of the project as well. So what I'm showing you on the screen right now is our website. I'll cycle through some of the tabs as I proceed. This is our sort of bombastic claim at the top, but we have more information as you scroll down. And I put the link to the site in the chat right now. So the Database of Religious History, it's a large-scale digital humanities project that's been at UBC now for quite some time. It was founded in about 2013. Reached its current form, the website that you're looking at, about 2016. And it originated as a sort of a collaboration between ancient historians, anthropologists, historical economists, psychologists of religion, and archaeologists. And the current director is Professor Edward Slingerland in Asian Studies. But we have collaborators really all across the globe. So in terms of what the database does, how we construct the data part of the database, we're interested in looking at basically the history of religious groups throughout all time and space. So our scope is quite large. It's a very big goal. But we do this by collecting expert, generally academic information about these groups. And the scope of our project obviously has lots of complicated caveats for how our methodology engages with basically the conversion of qualitative history to quantitative data. I'd be happy to speak more about that later. The data itself, the data in the database, is organized into polls, questionnaires that contain large lists of questions, generally in the order of maybe 400 to 500 questions per poll. And then entries, which are sort of the output of an expert, are then collections of answers to these polls. So a particular entry, you can think of it like an encyclopedia entry on a particular religious group, where they just answer all these questions. And the answers take the form of generally yes, no, the field doesn't know, or I don't know from the expert's perspective. So this is kind of the quantitative nature of our data. Each entry also defines basically a polygon on the globe, a map, and a time range. So that all the answers that the expert gives are sort of assigned to those default values. They're located in time and space, but they can of course be changed individually when there's sort of abjurations in the historical record. For those who are interested, the technical stack behind the scenes is Django as sort of a back-end Postgres database and a React front end. We can also talk more about that. In terms of where we get the experts from, we have all these experts contributing data. They're generally recruited by, we have a large editorial board of scholars of religion. We practice very light gatekeeping. The editors generally have final judgment over whether an expert kind of fits the criteria of the project. But we normally ask for sort of PhD students who are post their comprehensive exams and above. We also pay an honorarium for completed entries. And this is something that we've been pretty fortunate to be able to do, but we do it in order to value people's contributions that often fall outside of their contractual obligations. Whether they're contingent faculty, whether they're grad students, we want to sort of give them some reward for their work. In terms of the scope of the project right now, we're sitting at around 250 experts and they've contributed almost 500 entries, which has resulted in nearly 90,000 discrete points of data throughout time and the globe. We also archive, I'm glad Circle was already mentioned in a previous presentation, we archive the PDF versions of all our entries in the Circle repository. It's a good place to keep our data just in case the project disappears one day. At least we'll have some output. So that's kind of how the database is formed, where it came from on campus, but also how the data is collected and organized. So what's the point? The point is that the database was originally kind of created to answer, in order to test, work with these big theories on religion. And if you're interested, the work of professor of psychology at UBC, Noren Zion, wrote a book called Big Gods, which is this kind of overarching theory, these kind of grand ideas about history. They're often attractive. People love buying books, but they raise the ire of humanists, certainly mine as a historian of the ancient Middle East. And so this database was created in order to let experts kind of engage with that process and enter their own data. So at its most simple level, the database functions like an online encyclopedia. It's up-to-date sources of information on religious groups from around the globe, written by those experts in the groups. Entries can be updated, they can remain current, you can go back to them and change them. Also, the entries have references and citations in their answers. which allows people to find up-to-date bibliographies. We just added a feature now where you can create queries, and then you can export bibliographies from those queries. So if you're interested, for instance, in a belief in an afterlife, you can do a search query for that question throughout the entire database. You can filter it down to a certain area on the globe, certain time range, and then receive a bibliography of citations that are relevant to that exact question. This is, a radical departure from the idea of going for sort of top down, going to find the encyclopedia entry, trying to find the sources, whether they even answer the question you're interested in, and then going on to the next general research aim. It's also, of course, a source for quantitative data for sort of analysis of historical and cultural trends. Difference here, of course, is that we're really sourcing it from experts in those fields rather than dealing with kind of aggregate material. And then finally, I'll just point out that I've been thinking about pedagogical applications of the database and ways to use the database in the classroom. It's even more relevant nowadays with everyone teaching online. Having some sort of online platform can be really useful. And the two main aims of the pedagogy initiative are, one, just allowing students to investigate the database as an encyclopedia, as an up-to-date resource, but also investigating how history is actually written. When do you know enough to answer a question, right? How many sources do you need to accrue? So I'll just quickly end by taking you through, there's the main page, which you can visit, religiondatabase.org. You can browse our list of entries. If you go up to the browse and you see all of our authors and their entries. A single entry looks like this. This is an early Christian movement in the Middle East with a map and a date range. And then it has answers to questions, including qualitative data entered by the expert, so and citations. You might also have something like this. This is a Buddhist temple in San Francisco, right? So the database really spans a wide range of material. This is just a search query about monumental architecture across, if you're interested in monumental architecture from the beginning of time until now across the globe, you can query our database for that and receive all sorts of information. And then finally, if you go to the About section, you can check out pedagogical uses and other, we have a whole page here on other information. So I'm happy to answer more of these questions in the Jitsi room. Thank you.
Super. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for keeping on time. You're miracle workers. Now I would invite you all to find the Jitsi links that are in the program below the Zoom link and go in and out of the rooms that you're curious about. And thank you all for presenting, and I hope I see you again in a coffee hour or some other event, okay? Thank you.